Goldie, welcome back to the show. How are you today?
I'm very well. How are you, Elliot?
I am amazing. I'm excited to go for round two. So for the listeners who are tuning in today, Goldie and I did an episode maybe just about 14 months ago, I want to say, and it was so valuable, and it was more on your profession more than your personal journey. But I think that this episode was always in the books to discuss your journey on a very deep level, and I'm super excited to go into it. So I'm not going to ask the question of who you are and what it is that you do, because I hope that the listeners are going to tune into your first episode if they haven't already heard it. And where I do want to start is you giving a little bit of context about yourself in the lead up to the journey and where you got started with this health and fitness thing from the very beginning, not just our coaching journey, but what did health and fitness look like in your life prior to us working together?
Thank you for that question, because it's very relevant. I woke up this morning knowing that I was going to be on the show, and a large part of me reminded me of something that, in fact, you had said on one of your newsletters. Do you remember those?
I do. I wish I was still doing them. That remind me.
And it stayed with me at the time because I very much resonated with that. And I think in a nutshell, what I would like to say is when I started on this journey, I did consider myself work in progress, because I do come from a background of always putting health and fitness, in the front of my my priorities. It's one of my values, actually, health. But as I have progressed with you and realized that there was a very big need at the time for me to come back to something, not come back to it, but see it in a very different light and educate myself even further. What I would contrast is that today I'm still that work in progress, but I do pat myself on the back a little bit now and call it my masterpiece. There is a very large circle I've completed, and I think today, from being work in progress, I can say I have achieved a little bit of mastery in what were my goals.
Yeah, and I absolutely love that. And I think that the ability to then recognize that you can be both simultaneously is one of the most magical things that we can do, but also at the same time kind of having a standard for what the masterpiece looks like as well. I think that there's a lot in understanding your worth and being super sufficient just as you are, but also at the same time recognizing that, a masterpiece needs work, and a masterpiece is something that is maybe at the highest vision that we have, and that it does require a little bit of chipping away at, a little bit of work to do and tweaking, but also recognizing that, you can be the both simultaneously is absolutely beautiful, and you're always working towards this beautiful lifelong project, which is yourself, is something that's very powerful indeed. So I love that. And what I want to do is I want to scroll back the years even further and meet Goldie as a teenager, Goldie as a young girl. What did your life look like then from a health and fitness standpoint?
I think the most important aspect back then was there was none of it. There was a need for it, and I recognized it. But from a standpoint of, I don't feel like I look great. And I want to emphasize on look, because this is something that today I don't even use that word. I replace it with I want to feel great. And it's taken me years of understanding that you can only look a certain way if you feel a certain way first. So the Goldie who was a teenager was a lot more superficial in terms of how I must appear in front of people. And this is just not even about health and fitness. It was more about aesthetically. So if my hair was curly or straight, that made a difference to my day. If I was, suiting a certain outfit, then that sort of made it or broke my day. And it's incredible how little I knew about what I should have done, which was just, partake in some sport. And maybe I wasn't giving myself the opportunities, or I wasn't presented the opportunities. And if I was, I didn't take it seriously enough, because patience was a big learning lesson through the journey I've been with you. Good things take time. So that was Goldie the teenager. There was never really much focus on eating the right thing. It was, I have to just try to maybe eat less. This was also a big myth that I've uncovered over the years. It's taken a long time. But, it's part of growth, isn't it?
Absolutely. And where was the first awareness that you had that you wanted to start looking better? Maybe it started from how my hair looked and what I was wearing, but when did it first occur to you that actually my body needs to quote unquote appear in a certain way for me to be accepted, liked by others and myself as well?
I think accepted by others was at the forefront of my mind, but I did soon begin to realize, especially when I met my husband, that he didn't care how I looked because he saw me for who I was. And so that was never an issue. But what I did realize was when I had my first child, was this realization came to me, well, if I don't feel great inside of me, what am I going to be teaching my son? And that's essentially, there was a trigger there, I think, because obviously when you're pregnant, you gain the kilos, and then you have the baby, you deliver, and everything was smooth. I had this beautiful, being in front of me. And once I was settled into my routine with my child, I recognized, well, I can do more than what I have already been doing. By then I was doing sports. I was actively taking part in aerobics, and this was much before my running days. So once Nikash was born, I recognized, I think what I need to do more of is become stronger. And that was a new word for me. It wasn't about, I want to look good. It was, I want to feel stronger because I'm holding this child who's only going to get heavier. And what good will I be if I don't have a strong back, if I don't have stronger arms? It was just very organic, the journey there. The reasoning, behind wanting to engage in some form of fitness activity.
Yeah, that's where the different circumstances in our lives start to create new whys. And I think it's super important to be open to the changes that come, because had you not had your child at that time, you might have continued to not prioritize exercise as much. It might have been continued focus on the weight loss side of things and the fat loss side of things versus anything else. But as you mentioned, I now have a child to pick up and he's not getting any lighter. Like, it brings that new purpose and that new level of why. And I think that's why it's really important not only for people to listen to the science of life, but also listen to things as they adapt as well, because of the reason you started is probably not the same reason that you might want to be continue with your health and fitness today, and that changes year on year and time on time. So yeah, I think that's a really, really big takeaway as well. And I'm curious about maybe now your weight loss pursuits or your fat loss pursuits, as we're going to make sure that we correctly define them today. How many of those did you embark on ahead of reaching out to myself and before we started working together?
I think when I'll go back to the word strength, I was extremely aware of specific symptoms that I wasn't happy to be experiencing. Because as I told you, health has always been at the front of my radar, but because you don't see a specific need in the immediate present, you may just ignore it for the large part. I was beginning to notice that my back was hurting, my lower back. I was very aware that my pelvic muscles were looser and, a bit weaker as a consequence of the delivery. And I was very lucky that in those days, I was in the hands of a woman who educated me on strengthening your pelvic muscles. And I think it just started there. So knowing and learning and being a little bit more educated on the importance of the smaller muscles is where my journey began. And that's what led me to Pilates, which was the very first experience, I would say, formal experience of fitness for me, which was very different to cardio, anything related to sweating. I was skeptical, to be fair, as to what is this going to do and how is this going to, work for me. And again, I was very young as well. I was only 27 at the time. And as a 20-plus-year-old, you are looking to see who is inspiring you in how you want to look. Even then, there was a big need for me to look good, right? That had not completely disappeared. And I remember very clearly, I'm a big fan of the show Friends.
Me too.
So a lot of talk was done back then. Oh, Jennifer Aniston has transformed her body because she did this thing called Pilates. And I observed her journey as a viewer on how she looked different. It wasn't that she looked thinner or she just looked leaner. And everything was to do with this thing called Pilates. So I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to try it. And I didn't remember this until you just asked me the question, but that was a big reason why I went for it. And it suited my timings. It was comfortable to attend the classes. Again, I was very blessed with having a very good trainer at the time who taught me the technique of breath work and how that influences the actual exercise. And then, of course, results did show. And within a year or so, 9 months to 12, when my son turned 1, I was in a very different mindset, and physically I looked quite different to what I had been before.
Yeah, it's super impactful because once again, you picked up on one of those key signs that life was giving you. And it was not only the advice of your body telling you, okay, I need to be stronger because I'm having these pains. It was, seeing friends and saying Jennifer Aniston, that's another sign as well. But then also having the right mentor at that time to take you through that journey, which I think this is the thing with a lot of situations in life, is that there are gentle knocks at the door, right? There are gentle knocks on the door of saying, okay, there's something heading not in the best direction here. You can either answer now, and it's probably going to be far easier to deal with, or if we don't, it's only going to get heavier, that knock, and it's only going to get harder to deal with as well. So I think that's a big takeaway initially, is that you listen to those gentle knocks on the door. And now I want to kind of go through the years thereafter as well. You obviously had your second child. You also then got into running as well. What did that process look like?
So after I had Bianca, my daughter, this changed my body quite considerably. It was not as easy to bounce back, to the Goldie who was ready to have baby number 2, and she felt good. I always listened. This is just a moment I think I want to say that I've realized I've always been somebody who seeks professional help and not just word of mouth or read up. Of course, I read up on things, but the decisions come a lot from what the professionals tell me. And I do remember very clearly my gynecologist at the time said to me, if you can start planning your second child at the same weight that you were when you had your first one, then there is a higher chance that you will not have that residual weight hanging over you if you've managed to eliminate it through the years that you've had your baby number 1. And that just made a lot of sense to me, because I thought, okay, if I was weighing, 57, 58 when I was pregnant with Nikash, if I can get back to that, then I've managed to eliminate the toxins and whatnot. That's pretty easy. But, the gain of the pregnancy weight is it determines how you can then manage the next child, and if you choose to have a third one, etc. So I was able to start at the right weight, because I had been very cognizant of this advice. But when I delivered Bianca, I do remember I had gained a little bit more than I had gained when I was pregnant with Nikash. So there was that much more to sort of shed off. Again, I'm coming from a mindset of weight loss, okay? So this is when I was already 30. Today I'm 45. Things have dramatically changed since then. So, just wanted to give that pointer there. And so I was struggling it was about 5 kilos, I remember. And again, I was in the hands of my trainer at the gym, and she said, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, look, this Pilates thing is great. I'm feeling strong, but I do feel like I would benefit from shedding some weight as well. And she said, well, would you consider running? And I said, running? I looked at her like she was speaking, some alien language to me. Because again, it was a limiting belief I'd always carried my whole life. I'm the chubby, little bit overweight girl who can't run. I mean, that's just unbelievably, it was not in my dictionary. And she said, well, we can start slow. And when she said slow, I said, what's slow for you? Jogging, walking? She goes, yeah, what's slow for you? And I loved her questions. Again, I think it was a very powerful approach she took. So the running came as a consequence, again, of a need that I identified, which was I need to just take some weight off me to feel better. That this was my reasoning back then, to feel better, and that meant looking better. So I will feel better when I look better, It's funny how I say all these things today, but they just taught me so much. The wonderful byproduct of that was I became a runner. And this obviously has been a huge part of my life since then. So Bianca turns 15 in July, that will be the number of years that I have been a runner. And essentially, I think it's been at the core center of my fitness, whether I've, lost fat, gained fat, but it's always been at the core center. And you know this just from the 2 years we've been together on our journey. And a big confidence booster as well, Elliot, because I discovered something that I could do for myself, and I realized I was not all that bad at it. So it just added that boost for me, which was wonderful to experience as a side effect of choosing to be a runner.
Yeah, definitely something you probably didn't expect. And do you remember your first run? I can imagine that first run was probably quite intimidating, quite daunting, but I'm sure there's many people listening today who have like, running is not in my dictionary. That's what people in the London Marathon do, and that's about it, right? That's the only form of running I know. Or if I need to get away fast, then maybe I can move my legs at some speed. But other than that, it's just not something that is in my vocabulary. And I'm sure so many people can relate with that. So I'm curious to hear, what was that first run like, and how did you build the confidence off the back of that?
Again, it was baby steps. I remember my trainer at the time said to me, okay, I'm going to sign you up for a 10K. And I said, no, I can't do a 10K. I can maybe do a 5K at best. And she said, well, you know what? If you have to stop at 5K, you stop at 5K, because there's no running police behind you to tell you that you have to finish, which was comforting to hear. So she was able to coach me through even the first run, because she ran with me, and we crossed 5K, and I had prepared. Obviously, I had done my work for this first run, but I think more than the preparation, I just didn't have the belief in myself. So that run, what it obtained for me was this one objective: was I can do this. And I think she knew it, but she needed me to believe it. And that's always the case, right? You can tell somebody that they're great, but they won't really believe you until you feel yourself that you're great. We crossed 5K, and she said, how are you feeling? Can you go on? And I didn't even blink, and I said, yeah, come on, let's do it. And we crossed 10K. And I do remember she did prepare me for a visualization before the run, because this is obviously textbook running work, isn't it? I mean, now I know, because of the years I've been doing it, you have to visualize the finish line. And she said to me, what do you want to visualize at the finish line? And I said, I want to visualize my daughter, because essentially this has come as a consequence of her coming into my life. And I associate a lot of my motivation towards Bianca. And so she said, okay, let's visualize her waiting for you at the finish line. I said, yeah, but we may not see her because there's so many people. So what she told me was to associate a song on my playlist that reminds me of Bianca, and to have that strategically playing towards the last kilometer or 500 meters or what so. And I did that. So for me, the finish line was a big trophy, because I knew I was being welcomed by my child, who was going to cheer me on to do many more runs in the future.
And that's exactly what you did. How many runs have you done since then, in those past 15 years?
Oof, I've never counted, Elliot, but I think half marathons, if you speak of 21
If we're speaking races, yeah.
Yeah. Official 21Ks, it's about 8 or 9. And I've never done a full marathon. 10Ks, oof, I don't know. Many. Maybe double. Yeah.
And is a full marathon on the agenda in the future for you?
No, it's not. Because I did go through an injury in my mid-30s. I started running at 30, so not that I'm sort of putting a limit on anything, but it was later than the average person who maybe starts running. That's my opinion, okay? I'm not sort of gauging this on science or anything. And physiologically, I feel that my body can take 21K. I don't think I can actually manage more than that, because it can have a lot of impact on my lower back, which is where I have a tendency to get more injured. So when I had this injury back then, I was told to just prepare myself to be a runner for that much kilometers, not more, because I would be sort of crossing some boundaries. And I've been very respectful to that advice, again, from the professionals.
And honestly speaking, I think that's really wise, to be completely honest, because I think that there is an aspect that you might think, well, it's a limiting belief. But if you look around, even if you look at professional sports, there are some people who get injured every 2 or 3 games they play, or every 2 or 3 races they play. And then there's others who don't get injured at all. And it's not necessarily always down to their training or their nutrition or circumstance. It's just due to how much their body can take. And genetically, we're all given a certain set of circumstances and a certain body and limitations that we have within ourselves. And I think that that's a really good point to make, is that some people will be built to be amazing 5K runners. Some people will be amazing at 10K, and some people will be amazing at bodybuilding, whilst others will be absolutely terrible at it because of, genetically speaking, it might not be the best thing for them. So I really like that you had that idea in mind and you had the right level of professional guidance, and you've basically honed in on the 10 to 21K mark, I guess.
Yeah, I have. And interestingly, this is what then inspired me to consider another form of racing as well, which was the triathlon, which was something that, honestly, Elliot, for running was one big deal for me, but being a triathlete was definitely not something that I didn't even know what that meant when I was first introduced to the idea. And what I realized over time was it's a really beautiful complementing form of racing that also helps you to avoid injury if you're just, like you said, honing into one form of race, which is run. But this gives you the opportunity to tap into other areas that you may not even realize you can manage. And they're not that long, the distances. If you start from the super sprint, which is the minimum, it sounds like a big word, triathlete, but you can become, again, a master of all traits if you work on the different areas. And it just, and what the beautiful thing about doing a triathlon is that it works on very different muscles in your body. So that I equate to as balance, and even not just physically, but mentally. You're aware that you're now going to be, working into arm strength, or you're now going to be looking at legs or core. And this all just beautifully combines together and makes a package, which is then, the result is a triathlon.
Yeah, that's very nice, actually. If someone doesn't see themselves as a super long distance runner, running is a very intense and demanding and very singular movement based sport. Whereas when you go into cycling and swimming, you kind of take a lot of the impact off that you would receive from running. Yeah. It's that constant hitting the ground. And then also, like you said, you're diversifying by using your upper body in the form of the swim. And then you've got you're using your core throughout all 3 of those, but then again, your core strength within your cycling as well. So it's a nice way to, like you said, continue the pursuit of those cardio ventures, but without maybe running your knees into the ground or running your ankles or your shins into the ground by continuously running. Did you achieve that weight loss that you were after following Bianca off the back of starting running?
I did. I was able to meet the goal. I've also realized I'm a goal-driven individual. So if I don't achieve it, I don't sort of give myself a hard time, but I don't give up, and I try to keep finding ways to get there. So I did get to that number. And again, I say this as a number because today that number doesn't mean anything, but it felt good then. And I think it was very necessary for, you have to go through these transitions in life in order to then see what else is in store for you. So the work had started, the progress was being done, but little did I know that after you turn 40, things dramatically change again in the body. So for a long time, that was the recipe to my success. I was running, I was doing Pilates, the occasional yoga class, and I took tennis up again for a little while as well in my 30s, which is something I've always been very fond of. And it was doing good for me, along with the triathlons. And then, of course, as I said, you hit 40 and there's a very different thing in store for you. But again, it's awareness, that the journey of fitness is a lot of self-awareness. And that, I think, is one of the biggest lessons that I have taken away over the years, and more so working with you. You're reminded on a weekly basis to tap into your inner self and ask yourself these powerful questions like, what was your biggest win? Or what would you have done differently? How will you see yourself in a different way this week? those are just self-awareness questions, aren't they?
Exactly. And I think that reflection part is so, so valuable, and it gives us an ability to have that third person perspective and then actually do something with that information as well. I think that that's one of the biggest missing parts to life and fitness and anything that you want to do well in life is just that reflection point. What did go well? Okay, perfect. If that went well this week, how can I replicate it again so it can go well the next week? Same with what didn't go so well. Well, what were the gaps that caused this not to go well? And then we start taking action on filling those gaps as well. So that self-awareness and that reflection piece, I think, is really important. And now I want to get to the point of when we did start together, which was in 2021. You obviously were in your 40s at that stage. You came off the back of a very challenging 2020 due to personal circumstances as well. And I know that you mentioned that at that time, you were tempted to reach out then, but I think that you mentioned that it just wasn't the right time back in 2020. And eventually we did start speaking in about February 2021. So can you give us some context of what the months looked like leading up to reaching out for the first time, maybe due to the challenges that you had in 2020? Can you go through that process of what being in your 40s looked like, going through some personal challenges and eventually taking that step to say, okay, now is the time to turn things around?
Yeah, I think the biggest sort of turning point for me, as you rightly said, was I was grieving in 2020, and the grief itself is I want to say it's a very beautiful emotion because again it gives you the opportunity to open a window into self-reflection and ask yourself a lot of questions about where is it that I'm going with myself, what are my aspirations in life moving forward, because you're mourning the loss of a person. In this case, it was, for me, my dad. And I think I had realized at that point what I was grateful for. And one of the things that struck me the most was I want to be grateful and continue working on my health, because my health was something that could have gone completely haywire through 2020 as a consequence of my loss, as a consequence of the lockdown that we were all in. And I saw so many different contrasts with the community that I was surrounded by. I saw a lot of people had just let go, and not judging anybody, but they had let go. And I could see that there was a lot more drinking happening in my community, people close to me. I was making these observations. I was starting to drink a lot more as well. And this was something that, when you know this is not that great for you, but you just can't stop. So that was a big wake-up call for me, because I very clearly remember this one evening, everybody had gone to bed, and it was 2 or 3 months into, dad passing, and I was watching some film on Netflix, and I was having, a glass of wine, and before I knew it, I'd had the entire bottle. And I looked at this bottle, it was completely empty, and I thought, wait, that's not who I am, and I don't want to be that person, because I'm trying to cover my pain through this. I can do that in another way. And the best part is I knew how I could go for a more adaptive coping mechanism, because again, life sends you angels, and I had enrolled on a course back then, which was called Realizing Resilience. And it was a part of my coaching journey. So I had literally read on a chapter that morning on adaptive and maladaptive coping mechanisms through adversity. And maladaptive was drinking, drugs, overeating, etc. And adaptive was exercise, reaching out to your community, speaking about it, reading on it. And there was me in the evening doing completely not what I was supposed to subscribe to. So that was a big wake-up call. But then I also recognized I need to first give myself permission to grieve, and then I will subscribe to my health again. And this time round, I want to do it in a way that I can find someone who can hold me more accountable. And I always knew that you were there because I had heard about you from a good friend that we know from Kinner. And I'd had this conversation with him. He'd spoken to me about his journey, and I was very inspired to see the results that had occurred for him. But I'd left it on the back burner. I'd started following you on Instagram, I remember, and I was sort of kind of getting to know you a little bit through social media, obviously. I liked what I saw. I think what I connected was your style. You were gentle, but you gave the message in the affirmative, assertive way. So there was a lot of things that were ticking my boxes, but I also gave myself that permission to wait, you need a few months, Goldie, perhaps. Well, I don't know how much time I needed because you just don't know with these things. But I did know that at that moment, I wasn't ready for it. And I think it was, a good 8 months later that I definitely said to myself, okay, now is the time. And of course, I took some action on my own. I stopped the drinking. I was very conscious of this, and I told myself, I informed my immediate family, look, guys, I need to sort of work on this, which is a big part of, I think, solutions. You need to tap into your support system. So I did that. I was always exercising. So as I said, it never stopped for me, the exercising. I was even running in my house. I remember we were not even allowed to leave our homes, and I was running in my house up and down the stairs. That's how much I was tapping into my exercise, but I was not eating properly. I was not, looking after myself. I don't think I was sleeping too well back then either. And then, I spiraled. And I think February 2021 is when I said to myself, that's it. I need to get the right help now because I'm ready to look after myself. Because I was feeling a bit better by then, and that's when we had our first phone call.
Yeah, it's a powerful step in the right direction. I think there's a couple of big pieces of that story. The first is giving yourself that permission to take the time that you need, but also not allowing that 6 to 8 months to become 6 to 8 years. And I think that that's what so many people do. So I think it was powerful that you got yourself to a position where you're like, okay, well, this isn't me, the person who's drinking that full bottle of wine and staying up late and then waking up the next morning and potentially looking at doing the same thing, a few days later, for example. So I think that's the first big step. And then also doing a little bit of work on yourself and then knowing what you personally needed, the accountability, someone to take you to that next level as well. And at that stage, were you the heaviest that you had been? Because you mentioned the 58 kilo mark roughly when you were having children. So were you the heaviest you had been at that point when we started working together?
Yes, I had gained, and I think I was touching 63 or 64 when we started. And for me, obviously, like the number on the scales, it's not a big deal, Elliot, but it is also a marker that you kind of, okay, let's forget about the numbers. It's about the clothes at the end of the day.
Sure. Yeah.
You practically don't want to go and buy yourself another wardrobe because you realize that that's not going to fix anything. And it's just going to sort of add a layer, add a Band-Aid on the wound that just hasn't been addressed fully. So it was the clothes. I didn't feel that it was doing anything for me, anymore. So, and then the marker was the number on the scale for sure, 63. I think I remember that was the number.
Yeah, and I think as you've mentioned, it's what it represents and what it quantifies. It doesn't matter if someone's 63, 83, or 103. It really just comes down to what that feels like to them, and is it aligned with the person that they want to be? Are these the clothes size that they want to be wearing that feel that it represents them, their best selves? And ultimately you knew that was probably, quote unquote, within metric terms, 10 kilos away from where you truly felt like yourself was represented, or maybe 8 to 10, for example. So I think that that's what a lot of people will need to kind of get out of their mind. It's like, it's really not about the number of scale. It's really about how you feel within yourself. Like that scale number might be the exact same, but if you felt, as it comes back to your sense of how you're feeling, and you felt 10 times better, then it really doesn't matter, especially as well if you've got all your health markers in a good place as well, which tends to not happen if we're traveling upwards on the scales and we're 10 kilos away where we feel that we are at our best. And obviously we went through that journey and you ended up dropping around I would say about 10 kilos or so during that time. What were some of the things you learned and some of the things that surprised you during the success of your first fat loss phase?
Well, starting off with the number, I today can tell you that means nothing, to be honest, because there's so much more. There's so much more to gain. And I think that the first thing, so accountability was number one lesson. I've always been somebody who would like to believe that if I can't be accountable towards myself, I need to be accountable to somebody else, which then in turn gives me the ability to know that I can do this. So I started off being accountable towards you, but over time I've realized that this has changed my mindset. And now I am 100% confident in knowing I can do this on my own. So that's I think the biggest circle I've made. And I think that is predominantly because of all the other parts of education that I have been given. It's a bit like, you've been the teacher, you've taught me, but it's my responsibility as a student to learn, but then practice. I can't just learn, read, hear, listen to podcasts, and then not do anything. And then the next shift has been results. And how so? Let's forget the way I look, like completely forget. It's how I feel. I feel I'm a better person today. I feel that sleep is something that nobody talks about enough. And if you don't talk about it, it means hopefully you're either sleeping well, but if you're not, that has a direct impact on your mental health and your physical health. So that's been the biggest takeaway amongst many others. Sleep is so important. You could easily avoid anxious eating if you are sleeping your 8 to 10 hours. Easily.
Yeah, I was going to say that was a key that we noticed for you, right, in your journey, is that literally any time that you were having a challenging week, it was obviously because of maybe some circumstances that come up in your life, but the well-slept Goldie was able to handle those with not ease per se, but sufficient amount of energy that made those things not provoke so much anxiety, not provoke so much difficulty. And then it was those weeks where you're like, okay, well, actually, if I look back, my sleep sucked for like the past 3 or 4 nights. There was a kind of an immediate knock-on effect to say, oh, well, actually, then the situations became harder to handle. And then the maladaptive coping mechanisms started to kick in a little bit more as well. And that was a big, big one for us to realize during your journey, right?
Absolutely. I was able to discover, the power of naps. I was never a napper, but I guess it was the time as well. We were in 2021. We were still in I would say moderate lockdown for the most part of the world. So I tapped into that sort of advantage, as one would say, because I couldn't go anywhere. So let's take a nap instead. In the middle of my working day, I'd find myself napping, and it was doing wonders to my mindset. Eating more slowly. I've always been someone who eats very fast, and this was not having any positive effects on my digestive system, which was another big question you ask every week to us. How's your digestion? How's your stress? And how's your sleep? So going back to digestion, I didn't realize how poorly I was digesting until I decided to do some changes. And this was just simple things like sitting at your lunch or dinner time and being more present, or focusing on something at the same time which is adding value to you and not making you eat quickly, because you know that you have 1 hour and I'm going to use that hour, or 45 minutes. Okay, let's not say 1 hour is a lot for lunchtime, but 45 minutes to eat your lunch. Well, you know what? I'll watch a documentary, and whilst it's on, I'm supposed to be eating and not finishing the food and then watching TV. It was a parallel process. And these were all tips that you handed over to us, to me especially, because that was something that we recognized was not working for me.
Yeah, and I think it's many of the simple yet underutilized things. And it's like sometimes when you hear something like, oh, well, I'm used to that bloating, I'm used to my bowel movements being a little bit all over the place, and I become accustomed to those things, and they're just kind of back in my mind things. They're not really anything that becomes too important. But then you think, okay, well, what is the knock-on effect of poor digestion? Well, it's not absorbing the nutrients that your body needs. And what does not getting the nutrients that your body needs look like? Well, it looks like diseases, it looks like illnesses, it looks like conditions. And then you start to realize, oh, wait a minute, like these things are a little bit more important. What's come from me just thinking, okay, I need to squeeze in, my lunch into 10 minutes has now become, well, actually, if I keep doing this for the next 20 years of my life, then I'm not going to be absorbing the nutrients, and then I'm going to end up with deeper problems later down the line. And as you've noticed, the older you get, the later you get into life, they become a little harder to navigate as well. So yeah, I think those were big ones that we took away in terms of the sleep, in terms of your digestion as well. And how did you feel when you reached your fat loss goal after, many months of working towards it, kind of being in this new shape and having this new feeling ultimately? And I think that's a key point I want to make as well, is that the shape and the goal of an aesthetic perspective will get you there in the short term. But the reason why I don't stop doing what I do now when it comes to training and nutrition is because I don't want to feel any other way. So I think that you can probably share that perspective with me as well. So how did it feel to achieve the goal in your fat loss phase after turning things around?
Elliot, I've realized one thing. If you have control over your health, And when I'm going to say first physical health, this has direct impact on your mental health. And then if you have control, not control because you can't control mental health, but if you can manage your mental health as a consequence of having a better physical health, they go hand in hand. And then I think that's the recipe for unstoppable in life. And I say this with a lot of conviction because I've had a lot of setbacks as well in the last 2 years, as you also know. I mean, our relationship as coach and client has turned into friendship. So you do know a lot of my, setbacks. But every setback, I've only been able to overcome those setbacks and make a comeback, literally, thanks to taking control over my physical health, which has then tapped into my mental health. So if I have gone through anxiety, I now today know one of the easiest and most efficient ways is to go for some physical exercise, even on days when you're not up to it, because the repercussions of it are so wonderful in the later on. And why do this only when you're having a low day? Do it every day. So from it becoming a goal, which we can call it whatever, weight loss, fat loss, whatever, it's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle. And that lifestyle includes good sleep, eating well, and eating well means eating everything. I don't stop myself. I eat everything. But you know what's better for you. You know that the macros, there's a science behind it. And I think that is the myth that people just get either scared of or, it's not their fault. A lot of people are still under this old mindset of going on a diet is something you do to look good. I don't think, Elliot, in the 2 years that we've been together, we have ever used the word diet.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah, I don't think we have.
In any check-in, ever. It's always a loss of some kind. So in this case, we translated it to fat loss. Now, what is fat loss? Fat loss is recognizing that your muscles have an ability to work really well, but there's a bit of fat around them that you can eliminate. And then you become stronger, you become fitter. Fat loss is not weight loss because sometimes the scales will stay where they are, but you will look different. How? Because you're strength training. You're complementing the nutrition with the strength training. And strength training was a complete novelty to me before I entered the world of Elliot Hasoon coaching. I did not know what it was. I did not know what it was to lift weights. I did not understand why this is beneficial. I always thought that losing, fat equates to running or cardio, but it's not. It complements, yes, but fat loss is achieved through weight training, strength training. And of course, you're the expert on that, so I'm not going to keep going on, but you can concur, I think, on what I'm saying here.
Absolutely. And I think that there's a big distinction between weight loss that I always like to make is that, weight loss for me is when you come across that person who just looks like a smaller version of themselves, right? They just look like they looked before, but now there's a little bit less of them. Whereas fat loss in my eyes, or improving your body composition, essentially is probably the best way to put it, is when you are really like kind of what you said about Jennifer Aniston at the very start of the conversation. It's like she didn't look any lighter or any like thinner, let's say. She just looked stronger. She looked leaner. She looked like she had more shape, and she looked like she had more health about her as well. And I think that that's the thing that I want a lot of people to get. It's like, yeah, there's a little bit of extra fat loss there, and that's a big part, but we also need to strengthen your muscles. We also need to make sure that, it's not just about the fact that you are becoming a smaller version of yourself, but you're creating shape. You're creating ultimately the body that you want, that becomes ready to do whatever you need it to do, not just the smaller version of yourself. When actually, if you go down the traditional routes of weight loss, which is just calorie restriction and running, you end up not really being able to do much more with your body. And that's another big distinction there. When you're improving your body composition, your body ends up being able to do more, even with the weight that you lose. Whereas if you just do the typical things for weight, maybe you're able to run a little bit longer, maybe you now know how to eat a little bit less, but your body doesn't really know how to do much more than what it did when it started.
Exactly. And, I think over time, what I've realized is there's a wonderful way that I tell myself, weight loss is transactional. It's going from A to B. but fat loss is transformational because it's an inside out job. I mean, that's how I see it.
It's a beautiful quote. I absolutely love that. And it's exactly spot on as well. And what I want to do now is I want to transition into the next stage of your journey, which was mainly 2022. And I looked at your graph before we came on to today's conversation to see, for me, that looks like on paper, the year of maintenance, but at the same time, people think that, maintenance might not be something that's impressive. But if anything, it might be more impressive that you were able to maintain your weight for pretty much the entirety of the year. And once again, it's not just about maintaining this arbitrary number on the scale. It's what it represents, for the first time. And I think this is a big thing when people hear this. It's like, well, if you were able to maintain that great feeling for once you achieved the goals that you wanted in terms of making your body feel and look the way that it wants to, most people would take that, and most people haven't been able to achieve that. So I want to go through that because of also what ties into that is the marathon prep that we weren't quite able to finish. So run me through 2022 because I also have career changes noted down as well. So it was like a whoa type of year, right?
Oh yeah. 2022 was again, it was a roller coaster. If we were to see Goldie on a personal level, even professionally, and then we have Goldie on her fat loss and, fitness journey. But what I think sort of explains it in a nutshell is at no moment did I compromise on my health, irrespective of what was happening in my life. And I think that is why the maintenance was sustainable. And when I say sustainable, I don't think I ever did, extra training or extra running. Yes, I was preparing for a marathon, which does require some extra running for a period of 2 months, 2 months of 12 months. And even in that period, I had an injury, which I think for me was such a beautiful lesson because yes, so I fell and both my knees got cut up. And obviously this meant I couldn't do the run that was scheduled for 3 weeks later. But in those 3 weeks, what I learned was something I don't think I'll ever learn in my whole life, and God forbid, which was I did not give up. I just surrendered. I did not give up on the idea of running. I just surrendered to the idea that I cannot allow my body to go through that right now, physically, literally, and emotionally. If I just tap into the idea of healing, then it's far more productive for me. And so what happened there was I was not mobile for a good 2 weeks. I remember we just focused on upper body, and you set me up with like arms and some abs, and there was, the workout was very different, but it helped me towards my maintenance because I was able to manage my anxiety, which meant I wasn't binge eating. I wasn't doing silly things that I knew were counterproductive for all the, for what I had subscribed to, essentially. I didn't want to unsubscribe to this lifestyle that had worked so well and was going well. Just because I got injured? The victim mindset came, yes, maybe for a few days, which is normal. It's completely normal. But then we had a chat, I remember, and you said, well, what do you realistically notice yourself doing in the immediate future? And I said, I can do upper body because I'm still strong. I mean, I've lost ability to move my legs for the most part because I couldn't even walk at the time, but I can still do some upper work, and that will keep me going until I heal with my knees. And the funny thing was, it wasn't even a month into the process of recovery, and I did a 10K, if you remember, which was October. And I don't know how I did it, but I did it. And I think it was that. It was just never compromising on your health, always keeping it as a priority.
And what I like that you said there is that you mentioned that you didn't want to unsubscribe to the lifestyle. And I think that that's a powerful point because it's very easy to unsubscribe to a diet. It's very easy to unsubscribe from something that seems like it's only going to be around for a few months and it's only for the purpose of X plus Y equals Z, in the sense of I'm only doing this because I want to achieve this weight loss and then I want to go back to my normal life. But the fact that you made it a lifestyle, and as you mentioned, well, you weren't you might have to have adapted your training because you weren't able to use your legs as efficiently as you could before because you were injured, but you weren't going to stop training. the opposite wasn't, you weren't going to go backwards to your nutrition and, like you said, start binge eating. Yeah, there's a few days of feeling sorry for yourself, but on a long-term basis, that was never happening. And you weren't just going to give up on all this work that you've done for the last year and a half. And it's because, like you said, it's because it was a lifestyle. It wasn't just a diet that you were going to finish at some point. You're like, well, it's kind of finished itself now because I can't follow through with this. It was like, okay, well, this is a lifestyle. It's not going away. I'm still doing this. So what are my next options? And that's, I think, was the big key to your success, was like knowing that, okay, well, I can't do this right now, but the lifestyle isn't so black and white. There's more things that I can do within this time. And I think that they taught us a lot more than we expected, to be honest.
Exactly. This was like on a physical level. I had to go through this experience, and I went through it. Fine. A few months later, I was able to complete the half marathon, not in the UK, but in Barcelona, which was obviously very gratifying for me. And at the time, I remember also thinking, well, is it really about being so rigid with your goals? It's not. Another thing that I learned from this entire 2-year process is flexibility is key, and giving yourself the opportunity to do the same thing but differently, getting the same results it's absolutely okay. I wanted to run in I think it was in Oxford, but that's when I got injured. So okay, that's fine, but doesn't mean I'm going to throw away all the training I've managed to achieve. I'll just pause and then delay it for later. And then Barcelona was in the picture. There was a run in April 3rd, I remember. And that's what I did. I went for that with Nikash, interestingly. So community has been a huge part of whether I have influenced him or he has influenced me. I think it's a mutual, gain.
I would say so.
Yeah, it's mutual. He pushed me, I pushed him, he motivated me, he empathized with me, I empathized with him, because we have the affinity to understand each other when it comes to running and how important it is for the two of us. So there was that. And then of course I did get a new job towards the end of 22, August, September. I did not realize at the time how much anxiety this would come with, because I was adapting to a completely new schedule. It was hard. It was very hard. And I remember, and this was, I think this could have been breaking point for me, I think. And I said, well, I need to just put aside things in order to make room for this new job, which just sounds so awful, right? Like, what are you doing? Putting a job in front of everything else. And one of the things I was questioning was my fitness journey and whether I need to be subscribing to this lifestyle, because it involves planning, doesn't it? I mean, you don't just make these healthy meals with a click of a finger.
They don't make themselves, that's for sure.
They don't make themselves. So, but again, we had a conversation, and you said to me, "Are you sure? What is the cost effect of this?" And I was like, "No, you're right. If anything, I need more than ever in my life now is to stay true to who I've signed up to be, because if not, I'm not going to be a good coach, am I? If I'm not feeling it over here." So again, big lesson. It's not transactional. It's transformational. It wires you differently. And I can't stress that enough, because so many people just really have this belief that, oh yeah, just going to lose a few kilos and then I'll be back to my old self. Yeah, but what is your old self?
And your old self took you there in the first place. The old self took you to the place that you didn't ultimately want to be. So It comes back to that reflecting part again, and that self-awareness is like, well, if you look at the action and behaviors of the past self, it wasn't that they were bad. It's just that they don't currently align with the goals that you have and the lifestyle that you want to live. And I think that's the biggest thing. It's like it doesn't mean changing. It means stepping into this new identity. And as you mentioned, transforming yourself. And that doesn't have to be a complete change from top to bottom, but it means doing things a little bit differently if you want to maintain the lifestyle of the person who feels amazing all the time. And as you mentioned, those healthy meals don't make themselves. Those workouts do not complete themselves. And you have to show up and do it. And it's something that, fortunately, we can own our health, but we still have to pay rent. We still have to make sure that we are putting the gas in the home or the electricity in the home to make sure that it's still running and we still have light and we still have energy, right? And that's what your training and nutrition is on a week-to-week basis. Otherwise, the lights are going to go off and the energy is not going to be there. So I think that's a big point that I want to make there. And also what you mentioned in regards to setting things aside, definitely things need to be prioritized when, maybe you have your child, or maybe when you start a new job, for example. But if you can start those things with health and fitness, trust that it's going to be way easier to maintain your health and fitness with those versus trying to introduce it 6 months down the line after you've neglected it for 6 months. And you're like, oh, well, I'm settled in my job now. But now you have to learn how to integrate it whilst you've already put your habits and structures in place for 6 months. Whereas if you do that job of, okay, it might be a little bit harder for the first couple of weeks, but if you try and integrate it all at the same time, when you get to 6 months, you're good. You've got your new job in place, you've got your bearings on that front, and then you've also not lost the grip of your health and fitness either, which I think is vital.
I don't think I can see myself in a different life now. Even if we finish our journey as coach client, I know that a large part of me will still be in touch with you, because again, it's transformational. This is another thing that I don't think anyone really thinks about, is the relationship you form with your coach is not just something that you finish with. No, it goes on. And there will be moments I will probably come back to you and say, hey, Elliot, let's have a chat. I'm, going through something. And because, it's, you are now part of my support system, which is a very big thing to acknowledge, because not everybody is in that support system. It sounds like, fitness journey, but there's so much more.
There really is.
The onion gets, and there's so many layers to this. Yeah,
absolutely. It's something that I heard recently. I spoke to someone who I haven't worked with since 2019. He was like, even though we haven't spoke that much, we've had these brief interactions. He was like, I still have a mini Elliot on my shoulder that tells me things that I shouldn't be doing when it comes to health and fitness. So I know that the mini Elliot lasts for at least 4 years. So you've got that to come, but I'm sure that not only that, but we'll definitely be interacting. Like you said, we've built a beautiful relationship, and that continues to this day. And I want to come to this day as well, because 2023 has been a big part of your journey as well. And that has been something that's been super eye-opening, I think, to yourself as well as myself, in the sense of there was a point this year where, things didn't seem to be going quite as we wanted to in the terms of the new fat loss goal that we set to get you to ultimately the lightest and the best position you've ever been. We were using metrics as a point of reference, but not for the point of importance. But ultimately to get you to the best shape that you've ever been from that perspective. And all of a sudden, we come to a point in February and March or something along those lines where things weren't quite going as well as we expected them to. Can you run us through that story?
Yeah, I think as a human being, you get tired. You get tired because your patience is only lasting to a certain amount. And again, life doesn't stop. There's always challenges, thrown at you. And there have been, as like with everyone in their lives. And I realized that I felt a little bit stagnant. I guess I was blaming myself a little, which was not the best narrative. The inner critic was a bit on a high volume. And so I think what I wanted to sort of highlight at this point was, if you're going through that, what you need to tap into is how far you've come, and take stock of, wait, you're having a lull right now, but don't forget what you've done thus far. And let's go back and see, what is it that has enabled you to come this far? What are your strengths? I sound like a coach now, which I am, I know, but it really was about self-coaching myself along with you asking me the right questions. And I think that was, for me, it was the point where I realized how valuable it is to be with a professional who can ask you those questions, and you don't need to completely give up on something that just needs a pause, perhaps. And I think we spoke about this very openly, and I said, well, I think the best way that I can see myself going towards this end goal is putting maybe something there for me to be attracted towards. So I gave myself the opportunity to run again for a race. And because I recognize that I'm goal driven, and that's something I've done without any problems in the past, prepare for a run. And I remember very clearly, I was coming back from my trip to India, and I was on the flight, and I was just, before we were taking off, I was just checking my phone for a couple of things. And I got inspired to check, okay, so where are the next 21Ks in Spain? Maybe Madrid, because I've never run there before. It seemed like an exciting, idea to me. And I found one for April, and it suited my timeline in terms of it's doable. I'm not going to be running a race without any preparation, because I take that very seriously. And I locked in that in my mind, and I was like, this is what I need. I need to take the focus off the challenge that's not completely going right and put my focus on something else that I know I'm good at. And it was that. And we spoke, I think, a couple of days after I got back, and I told you about my plans. I think you were like, okay, you want to do a run and you want to do a fat loss?
Here she goes again.
Here she goes again. But in my heart, I knew this is what's going to help me to take off that stupid pressure that it was unnecessary, really.
Yeah, it allowed to place the focus on an area that, like you said, you knew you were good at, you knew you were capable of, and it could coincide with what we were doing on the fat loss side of things. And I think that maybe that it just provided that extra piece of motivation, like, okay, well, this is going to make sure that CLC, the running, is going to get done. And essentially that was a big portion of it. And we knew that the weight training was going to get done as well. And it also then became really important to make sure, okay, recovery is super important. So now the nutrition needs to be in check. I can't really be having too many late nights. Maybe I can't have so much alcohol and all these different types of things. And it allowed you to get that kind of more tunnel vision focus, which I think was the essential key to take us to that next level.
Exactly. And you know what it was? It was stepping out of my comfort zone, which I was not doing. I needed that. You do that in life sometimes. You have to push the envelope a little bit in order to get the bigger result. And the bigger result has literally been that, a transformational change in my head. I feel more confident. Honestly, I do, as a person, because I know that I feel good, you know, I feel strong. And maybe that is not the translation to somebody else, but for me it is. For me it is. If I feel mentally and physically strong, then I am a better person. I show up differently for my relationships, for my family.
And ultimately, that's what I feel like your journey has been. It's not been a journey of, okay, we just got a little bit of body fat off Goldie's frame. It's that we've literally, gone through what it truly means to live your best lifestyle, how you can be the best mom, how you can be the best coach, how you can be the best wife, how you can be the best friend that you can possibly be. And I think that that has really, really come to the forefront during all of these things that we've done with your physical well-being, your mental well-being. And something that I think that has been really incredible is your ability to go away, take on information, reflect, be so open-minded. And I think that's ultimately led you to where you are today, where you're feeling great, you're looking great, and you are got the key to success in the long term as well, which I think is probably one of the most powerful things, is that this isn't going away anytime soon.
No, hopefully not. Exactly. I mean, I think when you're able to listen to your body on such a deep level, which is, I think, the last thing I'd want to say, you are connected with yourself. And what better recipe than self-connection that then provides you connection with others on a much better level. Your self-esteem, your self-value only comes from you. We're not here to take it from other people, contrary to what a lot of people unfortunately think. I'm not here to take that validation from others. I don't care. But I need to know that I'm good with myself. And then, that's just the truth for me. That's my truth.
Absolutely. I was about to ask you if you got any closing messages for the listeners, but I think that was a pretty solid one. But anything else to add?
I think I've said it all, Elliot.
The one thing I have to say is that I'm going to respell your name from Goldie to Goaldie. I don't know why I have never come up with that, as in Goldie, for the goal-driven nature that you have. I don't think I've ever come to me in the 2.5 years that we've known each other. I was like, how have I not called you Goldie yet? But that's my new name for you. So you're now Goaldie to me.
No, it's true. I'd never heard of that either. You just coined a new term. But just big thank you to you, Elliot, really. I know that you help a lot of people, and God bless you. But what you've done for me it's been golden.
Oh, we're on the gold analogies now.
Pun intended.
Both puns intended. But no, the pleasure has been truly mine. And like I said, it's beautiful to start a fitness journey with someone where you literally know nothing about them. And then you come to the end of the journey when you feel that you've imparted like as much wisdom and knowledge as you possibly can. They've been so responsive in terms of absorbing that and applying that to their own lifestyle. And I think that that's one of the most important things that you know as a coach is ultimately you want to impart those learnings, but you want that person to integrate them. You want them to utilize them to the best of their ability and fulfill their potential. And that's exactly what you've done. And we've gone from not knowing each other at all to becoming friends. And I think that's a perfect kind of full circle journey in my eyes as well. But so thank you. As just as much gratitude as you have for me, I have for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Perfect. So we'll wrap up there, Goldie, but thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your journey.
The pleasure is all mine.